The year is 1812. Europe trembles at the name of Napoleon Bonaparte. His grand army, gathered from all over conquered Europe, seems invincible. The continental blockade imposed on England is strangling Russia's economy. Emperor Alexander I understands that a clash is inevitable, tension mounts, and on June 24th, Napoleon's enormous multilingual army of over 500,000 soldiers crosses the Niemen River. The patriotic war begins. The French army moves deep into Russia, hoping for a decisive general battle where Napoleon can crush the Russians in a single blow. However, the Russian forces, outnumbered, employ scorched turf tactics. Commanders Barclay de Tolly and Bagration, despite their disagreements, lead their armies eastward, wearing down the enemy with constant rearguard actions, depriving them of food and fodder. The Grand Army melts away less from combat than from disease, hunger, and desertion. Public opinion in Russia demands decisive action. The cautious Barclay is replaced by Mikhail Illarionovich Kutuzov, an experienced, cunning general beloved by the troops. He understands that retreating further is impossible. Moscow is at their backs. The site for the decisive battle is chosen near the village of Borodino, 125 kilometers from the ancient capital. The terrain is rugged, with hills, ravines, and small rivers, giving the Russian army a defensive advantage. Napoleon, finally seeing the Russian regiments arrayed for battle, exclaims, "There is the son of Austerlitz." He is confident in his star and the might of his army. His plan is simple and audacious: to break through the Russian left flank, get behind them, and annihilate them. Kutuzov, however, builds a defense in depth. His goal is not so much to win as to bleed the French army white, to inflict such damage that it cannot recover. The battle begins even before the main event, on September 5th, with a fierce fight for the Shevardino Redoubt. This advanced outpost was the key to the Russian left flank. The French throw immense forces at it. The fighting is incredibly stubborn. The redoubt changes hands several times. The Russian soldiers, having accomplished the task of delaying the enemy and allowing the main positions to be fortified, withdraw on orders. Napoleon sees this as a sign of an easy victory, but he is mistaken. This was merely the prelude. The morning of September 7th, the fog lifts and over 100,000 men on each side prepare for a deadly struggle. The roar of hundreds of cannons announces the start of the Battle of Borodino. Napoleon unleashes his first and most furious assault on the left flank, defended by the troops of General Pyotr Bagration, here on the Semyonovskoy Heights. Earthen fortifications were erected to feign Bagration's flatches, attack after attack. Wave after wave, the French infantry and cavalry of marshals devout, nay, and Murat throw themselves at these fortifications. The Russian soldiers stand to the death. Not one step back. Thunders through the ranks. Hand-to-hand combat rages in the smoke and chaos. The ground becomes soaked with blood. In one of the attacks, a shell fragment mortally wounds General Bagration. He is carried from the field, but his soldiers, enraged by the loss of their beloved commander, fight on with doubled fury. 8 times the French broke into the flatches, and 8 times they were thrown back. Simultaneously, a drama unfolds at the center of the Russian position. Here stands the Kurgan Height, where an artillery battery under the command of General Nikolai Raevsky is positioned. The French nicknamed this position the Redoubt of Death. It dominates the terrain, and its capture could split the Russian army in two. Napoleon throws his best forces at the battery. French infantry under General Bonamy breaks through to the height. It seems all is lost, but at this critical moment, General Alexei Yermolov, who was nearby, gathers scattered battalions and personally leads them in a counterattack. In a frenzied melee, the Russians retake the battery. General Bonamy himself is taken prisoner. To relieve the pressure on the center and left flank, Kutuzov makes a daring move. He sends the cavalry corps of Cossack Ataman Matvey Platov and General Fyodor Uvarov to outflank Napoleon's left into the French rear. This raid causes panic in the enemy camp. Napoleon is forced to halt his attacks on the Raevsky Redoubt for several hours and divert troops, including his guard, to counter the threat. These 2 hours give the Russians precious time to regroup and bring up reserves. By midday, Napoleon, annoyed by the delay, concentrates a huge mass of artillery and throws fresh infantry and heavy cavalry at the weakened Raevski redoubt. After a horrific struggle where everything descended into a bloody chaos, the French managed to capture the height. But its defenders, as they retreat, carry with them the glory of the unconquered. They had fulfilled their task, grinding down the best regiments of the Grand Army. As evening approaches, the fighting gradually subsides. The battlefield is a horrifying sight. Tens of thousands of dead and wounded cover the ground. Napoleon stands on the captured Russian positions, but the Russian army is not broken. It has withdrawn in an organized manner to a new, prepared defensive line. Ready to continue the fight the next day, the French emperor is grim. He expected a triumph, but not a bloodbath. His marshals beg him to commit his final reserve, the old guard, to finish off the Russians. But Napoleon, looking at the thin ranks of his army, utters the fateful words, 3,000 leagues from Paris, I cannot risk my last reserve. He understands that even in success, the losses would be irreplaceable. That night, Kutuzov holds a council of war. The Russian losses are enormous, about 45,000 men. The reserves are exhausted. To continue the battle the next day would mean risking the entire army, and with it, the fate of Russia. The wise commander makes a difficult but correct decision to retreat and abandon Moscow. With the loss of Moscow, Russia is not yet lost, he would say. The main thing was to save the army. Formally, by the laws of war of that time, the victory belonged to Napoleon. The battlefield was his and he occupied Moscow. But it was a Pyrrhic victory. The Battle of Borodino was a mortal wound for the Grand Army. It shattered its morale and destroyed its best units. Napoleon never achieved his main goal, the annihilation of the Russian army. Sitting in a burned-out Moscow, waiting in vain for peace offers from the Tsar, Napoleon realized the depth of his mistake. The Russian army, meanwhile, having executed the famous Tarantino maneuver, moved into his rear, cutting off supply lines and replenishing its ranks. The inglorious retreat of the Grand Army along the ravaged Smolensk road, harassed by partisans and regular troops, turned into a catastrophe. Cold, hunger, and constant Russian attacks finished what was started at Borodino. Of the 500,000-strong army that invaded Russia, only a pathetic remnant returned. The Battle of Borodino is more than just a battle. It is a symbol of unyielding spirit, courage, and self-sacrifice. It is the day when the Russian army, though it retreated, won a great moral victory that sealed the fate of Napoleon's invasion and marked the beginning of the end for his empire. The memory of Borodino's heroes, from the common soldier to the general, will forever remain in Russia's history as an example of the greatest patriotism.